Hey there, my name is Matt Weston with CRM Refocusing, and we wanted to produce a video to help you as a pastor about to implement Awaken in your church. Awaken is step one of our missional pathway, as you're probably aware, and we wanted to invite you into a conversation, a behind the scenes, if you will, conversation about how the different pieces of Awaken fit together, and some tips and best practices about implementing Awaken in your church. So, in the next few minutes, you'll join a conversation in progress between myself, David Zimmerman, and Kurt Curlin from our team. So grab your book, grab a cup of coffee, and we'll spend a couple of minutes with you talking about how we can make this happen, this workshop called Awaken. To kind of kick things off, guys, let's start at the end in mind. How would you guys say Awaken is designed? What is Awaken designed to accomplish in the life of the participant? So what's our end goal?
Take a whack at it.
Yeah, from my perspective, Awaken is designed to support Christians to be convinced that God has prepared them adequately to live influentially among unchurched people.
I'd add to that they would leave the training with more confidence and more courage to actually be Jesus to their neighbors, to the people that God brings near them.
Yeah. So is that clarity that brings courage?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Centered around the calling.
Yeah. Yeah.
The calling of God for their life. Yeah.
So for people who've experienced Awaken in a training session, in a training scenario, the workshop is pretty significantly different than what most of us have encountered before, in the sense that it is purely discovery-based. What would you say to a pastor who maybe has not had experience before facilitating discovery-based learning? How can we help them be successful?
Yeah, the first thing I'd say, Matt, is facilitating discovery is completely different than preaching, than teaching, than being a rhetorician. And so all of your preparation for your life is inadequate to prepare you for this. And so what we'd invite you to do is to trust the process. Trust the script, follow the timings. We've worked this out over hundreds and thousands of practices with churches from one end of the denominational spectrum to the other. So my invitation would be just trust the process. Mm-hmm. Don't resist the temptation to say more than what's written. Don't get to preaching. They don't need it because they're going to discover what they need to know.
Yeah, I'd add to that, Matt. The backstory is this has actually been carefully designed around adult learning theory called format training, which means that we've paid attention to the left brain, right brain exercises. And so I would say to pastors, avoid cutting and pasting, taking in, adding to and taking out stuff, because you may miss one of the four basic styles of learning that is embedded in all of our material and exercises.
Yeah. So given the experience of our team, as a pastor, where can I expect the learning to happen?
The learning is going to happen at the tables, around the tables and the table discussions, not from the front of the room.
Yeah. So the role of a facilitator, like pastors back in their local church, is to actually prompt and stay on the script and get to the learning activities at the table. And if you have to sacrifice something, sacrifice your stories, your talking, because it will surprise these pastors how thoughtful and how seamless and automatic this will go if they'll trust it. Kind of like what they experienced when they were in Awaken training. Everything was thought through, and if they'll trust it, I think they'll have amazing experience.
That's good. So trust God and trust the process. Is kind of what I hear you saying. Right.
Trust your people.
I wish we'd have said it that simply.
That's all right.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
So let's jump into the workshop itself. Let's kind of get in. The first major section of Awaken consists of timeline exercise, turning points, and also processing the past. What insights would you guys offer a pastor about those three sections specifically?
The first comment that I'd like to make is whatever you do, don't short circuit the time that people need to process individually and at the tables to get those yellow Post-it notes out.
It's huge.
So yeah, very important. So I think we suggest 15 minutes before you interrupt in any way. Monitor the room, look at people's rate of motion. If you notice people are slowing down, they're running out of stuff to put down, then I would invite several prompts. Who were your heroes when you were young? Who have you looked up to and admired across your lifetime? Who are the teachers, pastors, coaches, friends who've been influential in your life, authors, experiences? What maybe you've went to a seminar or something like that, or a workshop, or heard a particular message at some point, or went to a retreat and it was just pivotal in your life. Don't forget those things. Don't gloss over them. If it comes to mind, be sure you put it down. That's one thing I'd like to comment on. The other thing is a very high commitment to get them to do at least 30 to 50 yellow Post-its and not to short circuit the process. It's amazing in my experience, the older a person is, the fewer Post-it notes they seem to put down on their timeline, which makes no freaking sense at all. But that's just what they tend to do. So press in to have them just keep mining, keep looking for stuff, digging things out.
I would add to that, Matt, I think a consistent awareness of how time is being consumed. We have some really definite segments and suggestions of how to pace the kind of instructions. So it's going to be a challenge for most people the first time to watch and carefully monitor their time so they don't get behind. Second thing I would say is something that I think is helpful is people process at different speeds. So just because somebody isn't quick enough as an inward, introverted personality type, don't make assumptions they don't care or they're not involved. It's not uncommon for people to go home with some supplies and actually come back later with amazing results. So be sensitive to how people process and the differences in their processing.
So I'm hearing from you guys, if as a pastor I'm trying to implement this in my church and I am figuring out the timing. If I get behind, what I hear you saying, Kirk, is don't skimp on processing time.
Correct.
Stay, if you're going to skimp somewhere else.
Short at the front of the room, right. Cut stuff at the front of the room that you'd be saying otherwise and let them work at the tables. Let me say this too. It's a very, very helpful thing that we learned, and that is when about 70% of the room are finished, then move on. Don't hold any extras for the last person because you'll lose way too many people. So when about 70% of the room is done, then move on. Let me say something about the pinks if I could real quick.
Yeah.
Okay, so pink is for pain. Pink is not for bad. Yellow and pink isn't good versus bad.
That's right.
It's just painful or not painful.
At the time.
At the time, right. You may look back on it and say, boy, God redeemed that. God worked it for good, just like Romans 8:28 promises. But at the time, it was painful. I lost my job. My church split on me. I got fired. Those things were painful at the time. My spouse left me and my business partner embezzled money and like that. So make it pink, even if there were certainly yellow aspects to that relationship or that person or that job that you held or whatever.
Yeah, and right along with that, Matt, we have a tendency in the church to minimize the pain or to spiritualize it. Oh, it wasn't that bad. God redeemed it. And let the pain be the pain that they felt at the time. The other thing is at the end of this section, they're most likely going to break for the day or for the evening. And because we're revisiting memories that were painful and things that happened that were not pleasant, there can be some really strong emotion that gets rekindled or reconnected to, and we want to give that space and legitimize it and begin to work to see how God was using it. So we don't want to gloss over. That's my message. We don't want to hurry up and avoid the pain. Kind
of stay in the tension. That's kind of a theme of Awaken as a whole.
And let God minister to us through all of that. That's how redemption plays out.
So the individual Post-it notes timeline leads to turning points and insights. What would you say specifically about insights and some tendencies that we've seen as it relates to our insights?
Yeah, one of the distinctions is an insight or a lesson should be an insight. In other words, prayer is not an insight. What you learned about prayer is an insight. God is faithful is not an insight, but what you've learned about God's fidelity, that's an insight. So we'd invite you to flesh out, so what is it that I learned? What is it that God either taught me at the time, or when I look back on it now, I realize that I've learned through that experience? Yeah, specifically, right.
Yeah,
That's it.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, we could probably move on.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's any other thing. I interrupted you, so I wanted to make sure we got
I could
what
make
we
a comment.
needed done.
I would say fewer turning points are better than more. We say 3 to 5. So my bias would be pick the 3 biggest ones, 4 maybe, as opposed to having more. But anyway, that's just a personal preference.
So from there, participants of Awaken are introduced to a tool called the Personal Calling Statement. And the first 2 components of the PCS are values and biblical identity. So what could we say to facilitators that would help them to facilitate those 2 sections?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to my mind, Matt, is this conversation that people get wrapped up in with aspirational values, things that are true, that they believe in, but really don't show up in their behavior. And so I would encourage pastors to really ask people to look at their timeline to see what do they see and start in that place. Because some people, for example, like believe in exercise, but they've never exercised. And so that's something I believe is a value, but it doesn't show up in my timeline. So we want to interrupt having stuff to shoot for that isn't really us.
Sure.
Yeah. So it says it in the text, but it just says values show up in your behavior, not in your preferences, not in your belief system. So that's really what we're getting at, I think.
That's right.
That's huge, and that's huge.
It is.
That's really huge.
Because we're in the church and it's supposed to be a certain way. We want to be careful that we're not talking about something that should be but isn't really true.
Right.
Yeah. Amen.
And in terms of biblical identity, what are some tendencies or some traps that we might fall into there that we want to avoid?
Yeah, if I could take a slice of that.
Yep.
The challenge for most of us on the evangelical side of the church is so much of our Christian life is about doing what we do and what we don't do. And what we're trying to do with biblical identity is to actually remove all the doing. And so I really want to press you to challenge your people to make the identity statement be a being statement without any reference to doing. So it's not, I'm a son of God, I'm a child of God, and fully loved so that I can lead the whole world to Christ. That's not it.
Right.
You're a beloved son of God just because you're a beloved son of God. That sort of thing. That's the distinction we want to try to make there.
Yeah, and we also see a lot of times people are trying to be doctrinally pure, and Christianese, we're actually asking and inviting them to say it in an expression that is heartfelt, that actually is filtered through their unique sense of how they relate to the Heavenly Father and how the Father relates to them. So we'd like it to be really personal and not so much a doctrinal truth.
Intimacy.
More
relational.
Yeah,
all those
relational.
things.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
So at this point in the workshop, we take a break from the PCS and we spend some time looking at the influence of Jesus. As facilitators are working through this section, what insight will we offer?
First thing that comes to my mind is this is a rapid, short section that actually tees up what's coming, which is a personal impact statement.
Direct tie.
Exactly. So stay to the script, move quickly, and frame impact being who Jesus is in the neighborhood through you. And so move quickly through this life of influence.
Yeah, there's a question that we ask at the front end of that. We assert Jesus is probably the most influential person who's ever walked the face of the earth. So how is society today, how is the culture today impacted because of Christ and the way he carried himself, the way he impacted the world? And we're imagining that the room is going to come up with answers like charities, for example, charitable giving, very unique to nations that have been heavily influenced by Christianity through their history, hospitals, orphanages,
colleges,
universities, right?
Yeah.
Almost the entire education system was originally founded, as a gift to actually to develop pastors and whatnot, ministers. So, yeah, those are the kind of things that we're aiming for there on that question.
Yeah, and in that module, the John 4 is really kind of central to this module. So as participants are working through that passage, what are some pitfalls to avoid, and how should the facilitator approach facilitating that piece?
Yeah, if you've got a relatively small room, we ask you, the instructions say to break your table into pairs and have one pair do the first third of John 4, second do the second third, and like this. But honestly, if you got a small room, you could have one table do each. The idea is just to move quickly through it. There's no right or wrong answers to that, but you're going to see evidence of Jesus seeking, reconciling, and healing in John chapter 4, as well as the rest of the Gospels. We just arbitrarily picked John 4 with the Samaritan encounter and the exchange of the woman at the well and all that. So anyway, there's no right or wrong answer, but we invite you just to move quickly through it. It's going to set up and seed what's coming next, which is our impact.
Yeah, right. And so we move to that. So from the life of influence, we move to personal impact, which is really the culmination of the PCS. So how can we help pastors and leaders to facilitate this section, specifically as it pertains to coaching participants around their impact statement?
It takes a lot of courage to receive something that an individual participant offers if it's framed around how they connect and interact with other Christians. We invite you, Pastor, to really reframe the exercise, because it's how you have been created, designed to impact people God brings near you who are not yet convinced or Christ followers. So it takes a lot of courage to bless that, but reframe it and ask them to go again, to connect naturally based on their story, based on their shaping, with people outside the church. That's the key.
To be real explicit, the impact statement actually has to do with outside the walls of the church.
That's right.
With people who are unchurched and far from God.
And it doesn't mean everything else you're doing in your life is bad or not valued. It's just that this exercise highlights you were created to have impact with people that are far from God, but God has brought near you. That's what I'd say.
Let me, as well on this topic, let me offer an apology. There are 4 examples that we give in the workbook. The impact statement is supposed to focus on 2 things. Who's going to be impacted, and what difference will it make in their lives when the kingdom of God comes to them? And it's not about how. And the reason that we exclude how is because the how will have to change over the years and decades as you are living your calling. You have to figure out newer ways maybe to have that how happen. In the examples that we give, several of them say like through doing garage sales, very specific things. So those are lousy examples, but they're real life examples, which is why they're there for the time being. We'll fix them eventually, but we don't want to set you up to fail, and really to a degree we've done that because those examples aren't ideal in that regard. So we want to eliminate the how and just get clear about who's going to be impacted and what's the impact going to be when the redemption of Christ comes. Now, let me say this, if I could real quick. Depending on who you're talking to, one of the answers that we hear most often about what's the impact is, well, they're going to receive Christ. And I don't mean to be irreligious when I ask you to press on them. So when Christ comes and redeems a life, what difference does it make? Well, obviously, it makes all the difference in the world. Well, specifically, what do you care most about? Is it hope from hopelessness? Is it peace with God? Is it peace, is it reconciliation in their relationships? Is it freedom from addictions or oppressions? So when Christ comes into a life and takes up residence, I would like you to press on, so what do you care most about that Jesus brings when he saves a person, when he redeems a life?
Yeah. So what? You just ask the so what question.
The so what question.
Is what I hear, yeah.
Yeah.
So that might actually seem to be a fitting end to the workshop, but the team has actually gone a step further and included a piece about surrender. Help us understand why this module was included, and what do we need to know about facilitating?
Yeah, so I just remind pastors that the surrender piece is really the crescendo of the workshop. It's the opportunity for the pastor, for you, to model a new way forward with vulnerability, with actually talking about some of the real stuff that lives in you that could keep you from living out your calling, helping the church go into the community. So it's a great step for pastors to take the lead on being vulnerable, being honest, authentic, and the people need to see that this is a challenge, but you're pressing through it.
Yeah.
And giving yourself over to God in a new way. New wine being poured into the new wineskin.
And you're talking about, David, with the examples of the different bars that we hang out, that we cling to.
That's right.
Like I heard an example of somebody said about control. So, as your senior pastor, listen, I struggle with control. I like things to turn out a certain way. This is really a point of challenge for me. And so when I go to surrender today, I'm going to be surrendering that bar of control so that I can let go and let Jesus catch me.
So imagine, Matt, leaders asking their people to do stuff that they have first done. Mm-hmm. So in other words, say it a different way. I'm not asking my people to do something that I'm unwilling to do myself, and I get to go first. So it's a powerful way to conclude.
So in terms of the spiritual kind of rhythm of the workshop, this is really the high point. This is the crescendo.
It is.
Yeah, this is answering the question, what could get in our way from living out our calling? So it's key.
And am I willing to choose to lay down the things that will keep me very naturally from engaging life on mission? Now there's a wide variety of cultures in the capital C church, and you may be from a culture where we don't pray out loud, where we don't confess things to one another,
right,
where these things don't happen. And so in a context like that, you're just going to need to be sensitive to what's reality in your tribe, and so it may be a very short, a minute or 2 minutes each, silent prayer. I get that. In other contexts, we're very all about
expressive,
letting it all happen.
Yeah.
And we've seen all kinds. And the crazy thing is, even though I may prefer one extreme or the other, it all works.
Yeah.
It all works if we will surrender. Just go to surrender in the way that we meet with God.
It's powerful. Powerful. So as we kind of conclude the workshop proper here, say a few words about the different ways that Awaken can get plugged in and played with.
So the first standard, I just want to remind the pastors, is that it works well as a 9-hour format. So 3 hours the first evening, followed by 6 hours the next day is our preferred and best practice. But there are also, it's designed to be offered as 3-hour sessions, and can be done that way.
Or 6 90-minute sessions if you wanted to break it up and try to do it on every Tuesday night for 9 weeks or something like that. The downside of breaking it up is you're going to have people that are going to miss much more often. You can also do Awaken and Activate together as a retreat, a weekend retreat away. It's 15 hours of training, so it's pretty intense, but it can actually get done over a weekend.
Yeah, and I would add to that, Matt, we have found that by offering an Awaken workshop, not everyone in the congregation can attend that one scheduled offering or workshop. So our best practice is for a church of any size to offer it at least twice, because the intent is to get as many people in the adult congregation population of the church to experience it. It's actually very, very important to get more of the mass, the critical mass. The more people go through it, the better.
And not just that, but who's in the room.
Yeah, that's good too.
You want to make sure that your key leaders, your deacons, your elders, your trustees, your staff, that's right. You want to make sure those folks are there. And interestingly enough, those who have influence but may not be in a position of leadership, but they have got lots of influence in the congregation, so you want to make sure as best you can to invite them to be at the cutting edge, the front edge.
Because all that builds momentum.
That's it.
It does.
Yeah.
To change the DNA of the congregation from, I'm a consumer of religious goods and services to I'm a minister of the gospel of Christ, we need to have that kind of momentum moving. Yeah, absolutely.
And we would assert it starts first in the heart anyway. So
of the pastor.
Yeah, let's start with the heart of the pastor and then see it unfold.
So you mentioned Activate a second ago. Activate is the second step of the missional pathway, which happens ideally 30 days after Awaken.
That's right.
Help facilitators know how to cast vision in such a way so that the urgency and the importance of Activate is communicated to participants. So why should I come back in 30 days?
Okay.
Yeah, this is sort of an argument from silence, but in our experience, relatively few Christians, based on Awaken by itself, will actually move out and begin to live their calling statement among the unchurched, apart from the support that an Activate provides for them, which you'll understand as you experience it. It's really brilliantly written and designed, and does, in fact, in truth, mobilize, catapult the congregation into engagement with the unchurched, as we saw like just today, for example. So once again, here it is. So that would be I think that as a leader, we can either preach. Our typical way is to preach in a compelling way, and then hope that people will somehow muster the endurance and the courage to take a machete and whack and hack their way through life to try to live out what we've just challenged them from the pulpit. Or as leaders, we can pave a pathway that they can then walk much more readily without the machete, without the undergrowth, but a paved path. And that's what really Awaken and Activate provide.
Yeah, so in Awaken, you make the discoveries. But discoveries alone are not enough to actually get the job done. So Activate is the support to actually do something with your discoveries. And I would say because people live such cluttered and overly complicated and overly scheduled lives, they feel overwhelmed. Sometimes if we don't give them a way to actually change their lives and their priorities and their commitments, then we're setting them up to fail. So Activate is the implementation of these discoveries to help them move their life into more redemptive relationships with people outside the church.
Yep.
And so it's a must.
Step 2.
Step 2.
So thanks for your time, guys. And thank you for your time.
Thanks for investing in the kingdom of God and in your communities.
Yeah, and we do. We pray the Lord's blessing on you as you lead and as you send out and deploy your people into mission in the world. Blessings.